a very reasonable assumption, knowing that I spent 9 years as a student, as an undergraduate student, then I got my master's degree, and now I'm a lecturer. People assume that there's a lot of commentary on education in the book, because Kvothe spends a lot of time in the university himself. That one, I have to say that the guesswork there is really understandable, but it's really off base. People say, ooh, Pat went to school for 9 years. I bet you some of these teachers are his teachers, and he's kind of poking fun at them. I'm really not. Like Dante wrote the Inferno and populated it with everyone he hated, No, I'm not playing that referential kind of bullshitty formalist literature game here. These people, I might have based some of their personalities off people, but no, I just created what I thought was a realistic university. There is definitely a lot of commentary about how do you find out the important things. And while I very much enjoyed my undergraduate education, when I went on to get my master's degree, I was somewhat disillusioned because as an undergraduate, I was at my leisure. And I'm like, this semester I'm going to study, Sanskrit theater and puppet theater, over, the Bunraku puppet theater and ancient Greek philosophy. Great, I'm just happy as a pig in shit. And then I go to grad school, and they say, well, here's 12 courses that you can take. You need to take 9 of them to graduate. And we're not offering 2 of them because we're down a faculty member. Have fun. And I'm like, wait. Suddenly I'm not in control of my own education anymore. And then, of course, the classes themselves were occasionally frustrating. I wanted to do a paper on every culture's mythic connection to salt. Why? Well, because I'm a geek, because I find mythology very interesting, but every culture has a different mythical attachment to salt. In some of them, you throw them over your shoulder to prevent bad luck, or it's protective, or it's sanctifying. In Japan, you use it to purify things. And I go, what's the connection? I want to investigate this. And this old professor, with a white beard, and he says, well, how about you write a paper about Shakespeare's use of the word salt? So I wrote a paper about Shakespeare's use of the word salt. Not extremely edifying. I really like this world. I've taken a long time to construct this world. And of course, strangely enough, the world itself doesn't really have a name. People keep referring to it as Rothfuss's unnamed fantasy world. Right now I think of it as the Four Corners, this little piece of the world. I wanted to create a world that was big enough for many stories. It was always very frustrating to me to read a book and really fall in love with it. You fall in love with the characters, and then it seems like the author gets bored and just wanders away. But you want to live there for a while longer. I think some authors paint themselves into a corner because of the nature of the stories they tell, where the world doesn't really exist except as sort of like a movie set where like the action takes place and it looks very realistic in the story. But if you turn left instead of right, suddenly you realize it's just plywood with a coat of paint over the front. I've really built the whole world. I've got dead religions that nobody believes in anymore. I've developed like 5 currency systems, and 3 of them don't appear in the book. I do this because it amuses me, but it also adds a depth to the world. And I know if somebody wants to turn left instead of right, there's something there. That means I'm very attached to the world. I also didn't paint myself into a corner by telling the stereotypical fantasy story, which is a young man and his 4 friends band together to save the world from certain destruction. Because how do you do an encore after saving the world? You mean you save the world? Yay! And there's a party and everyone gets medals. And then what's the next book about? Do you save the world again? It's strange. You can't do that. But because I am telling the story of a person, there's plenty of other people in this world. There's plenty of places that you haven't explored yet. There's plenty of stories that no one knows. So I'll play in this world for a long time. That said, I have a few other ideas for some other books that I think would be really fun to write. I actually have a little children's book that I wrote just on a lark a couple years ago, a not for children's book. And this one I can do the pitch on because it's very simplistic. It's like Calvin and Hobbes. Did you guys have Calvin and Hobbes over there? It's like Calvin and Hobbes meets Coraline, Neil Gaiman's dark children's story. So I'm very proud of that silly little story. But there's that. I would really like to write a satirical, humorous urban fantasy set in a college setting. I think I would have a blast writing that, because in some ways this story that I'm writing now, it's epic fantasy, but it's sort of it's making fun of certain elements of the epic fantasy genre, where he has this huge epic fantasy reputation, but then you see the real life that he led, and it doesn't compare. I would like to write an urban fantasy kind of the same way, where it plays off those urban fantasy conventions. I would have a blast writing that.